They left us on Interstate 40 like garbage bags tossed from a moving car. My daughter was 5 years old, and they didn't even wait for her to wake up. My name is Lissa Thorne, though I've thought about changing it 1,000 times since that evening. The name connects me to people who proved they never deserved to call me family. But I kept it, at least for now, because I wanted them to know exactly who dismantled their perfect little empire, brick by carefully placed brick. The sun was setting over the Arizona desert when our Lexus LX 570 came to a stop on the shoulder of Interstate 40. I remember thinking we'd blown a tire or overheated, common enough on these long stretches between nowhere and somewhere. Chloe was asleep in her booster seat beside me, her small hand still clutching the stuffed rabbit I'd saved 3 months to buy her. The air conditioning had been blasting cold air for hours, and I was half dozing myself, lulled by the monotonous hum of highway driving. "Get out of the car." My stepfather Richard's voice cut through the mechanical white noise like a blade through silk. Cold, precise, final. I blinked, disoriented. "What? Is something wrong with the car?" "Get out." He still hadn't turned around. His hands remained on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the leather. My mother, Eleanor, sitting in the passenger seat, finally moved. She removed her designer sunglasses with deliberate slowness and turned to face me. I'll never forget her eyes in that moment. They weren't angry or emotional. They were empty, like she was looking at something that had already ceased to exist. "We've given you enough chances, Lissa. You're a burden. Get out, now." The words didn't make sense. We were in the middle of the desert. The nearest town was at least 20 miles behind us. Chloe was asleep. We had no money. I'd given them the last of my tax refund 3 weeks ago when Vivian, my half-sister, said she needed help with an emergency. The emergency turned out to be a handbag she'd seen on Instagram. "Mom, Chloe's asleep. We don't have anywhere to go. We don't even have—" Richard moved faster than I expected. He was out of the driver's seat and yanking open my door before I could finish the sentence. His hand closed around my upper arm with enough force to leave bruises that would last for weeks. He hauled me out of the car, and I stumbled, trying to keep hold of Chloe as she jolted awake with a frightened cry. I hit the ground hard. The shoulder of Interstate 40 was all gravel and broken asphalt, sharp enough to tear through my thin jeans and scrape my palms raw. Chloe was screaming now, confused and terrified, reaching for me as Richard pulled her out more roughly than he'd ever touched his own daughters. He dropped her beside me like she weighed nothing, like she was nothing, and stepped back toward the car. From the middle row of seats, Vivian slid over to the back, a smile playing at the corners of her perfectly glossed lips. She'd been on her phone the entire drive, probably curating her Instagram feed, crafting captions about gratitude and family and living your best life. Now she leaned toward the open door, that smile blooming into something uglier. Honestly, good riddance. "This car feels so much more spacious without deadweight like you taking up room." She reached out the window and tossed my battered purse onto the gravel beside me. It landed with a pathetic thud, spilling its contents: a near-empty wallet, Chloe's inhaler, some loose change, a pack of crackers I'd been saving for when Chloe got hungry. The Lexus's engine roared to life. Vivian was still smiling as they pulled away, her hand raised in a mocking wave. The taillights glowed red in the gathering dusk, 2 eyes watching us get smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror until the desert swallowed them whole. I could hear Vivian's laughter carrying back through the dry air, triumphant and cruel. Chloe was sobbing into my shoulder, her small body shaking. "Mommy, why? Why did Grandma and Grandpa leave us? When are they coming back?" I wanted to tell her they would. I wanted to tell her this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, that any minute now they'd realize what they'd done and turn around. But I'd learned years ago not to lie to my daughter, even when the truth was a knife that cut us both. "They're not coming back, baby. But it's okay. We're going to be okay. Mommy promises." I didn't believe it. Not yet. But I held her close and let her cry into my neck while the temperature dropped and the sky turned from orange to purple to black. The desert at night is a different kind of beast. The heat that bakes everything during the day vanishes, replaced by a cold that seeps into your bones. I took off my jacket, the only one I had, and wrapped it around Chloe. She was still crying, but softer now, hiccuping against my chest. I tried flagging down cars. The first few times, I stood at the edge of the shoulder, waving my arms, hoping someone would see a woman and a child and understand that we needed help. But headlights approached and passed without slowing. Some even accelerated, as if we were a threat instead of people in need. After the 5th or 6th car roared past, I stopped trying. I was too tired, too cold, and Chloe's crying had turned into a cough that made my chest tighten with worry. We walked. I don't know how far. My phone had been smashed 2 weeks earlier when I'd refused to loan Eleanor money for her charity auction. She'd grabbed it out of my hand during an argument and thrown it against the kitchen tile, then told me I was being dramatic when I picked up the pieces. So we had no way to call for help, no GPS, no light except the moon and the occasional passing vehicle. My shoes fell apart after the first mile. The soles had been separating for weeks, held together with duct tape and prayers. Eventually, I kicked them off and walked barefoot, Chloe clinging to my back, her breath warm against my neck. The asphalt was still hot from the day's sun, but the gravel on the shoulder bit into my feet with every step. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other. I couldn't think about what would happen when we reached wherever we were going. I couldn't think about the fact that my own mother had looked me in the eye and called me a burden before abandoning me in the desert with her granddaughter. I could only walk. It must have been close to midnight when I saw the headlights coming up behind us. I didn't bother turning around or trying to flag the vehicle down. I was done with hope by then, at least the kind that depended on strangers' kindness. But this time, the vehicle slowed. It was an old pickup truck, the kind that had seen better decades, with a mismatched paint job and a dent in the driver's side door. It pulled onto the shoulder ahead of us and stopped. An older man climbed out of the cab. He must have been in his 60s, weathered face, work-worn hands, the kind of person who'd spent his life doing hard labor under harsh suns. He looked at me, looked at Chloe on my back, and his expression shifted from curiosity to something that looked like pain. "You need a safe place to go, miss?" I couldn't answer at first. My throat was too tight. I just nodded. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need my story. Didn't demand explanations. He walked to the bed of his truck and pulled out some blankets, a thermos of still warm tea, and gestured for us to climb in. The truck bed wasn't comfortable, but it was better than walking. Chloe fell asleep almost immediately, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled like motor oil and dust. I sat beside her, my arms around her small body, and watched the desert roll past under the stars. When we reached a small town, little more than a gas station and a diner, and a handful of buildings scattered along the roadside, he pulled over. He reached into his wallet and pulled out some bills, pressing them into my hand before I could protest. "I've got 2 daughters," he said quietly. "They should never have to go through something like this. I'm sorry someone made you. Try to stay strong, okay?" $50. It felt like a fortune and an impossibility at the same time. I tried to thank him, tried to ask his name, but he was already climbing back into his truck. He gave me a small nod and drove away, leaving Chloe and me standing outside a diner with a flickering neon sign that read, "Lena's Place, open 247. The diner was nearly empty. A tired-looking waitress was wiping down tables, and a cook was visible through the window to the kitchen, scraping down a grill. I carried Chloe inside and slid into a booth in the corner, as far from the windows as I could get. She woke up long enough to drink some water and nibble at a muffin I bought with some of the money the old man had given us, then fell back asleep with her head on the table. That's when I cried. Not the quiet, controlled tears I'd been holding back all night. Real, ugly, body-shaking sobs that I tried to muffle with my hands so I wouldn't wake Chloe or disturb the other customers. Everything that had been building for years, every moment of humiliation and casual cruelty, every time I'd swallowed my pride and accepted their contempt because I thought that was what family meant, it all came pouring out. I'd spent my whole life begging for love from people who saw me as less than human. I'd made myself small, made myself useful, sacrificed everything I had because I thought that eventually they'd see my worth. That eventually, my mother would look at me the way she looked at Vivian. That Richard would acknowledge I existed as more than an inconvenience. That I could earn my place in a family I'd been born into. But they'd never seen me at all. To them, I was just something to use, until I stopped being useful. And tonight, they'd tried to erase me completely. They'd left me on the side of a highway with my 5-year-old daughter like we were trash to be disposed of. They'd done it calmly, efficiently, without even a moment of hesitation. And they were probably already back home by now, probably already laughing about it. Vivian was probably posting on Instagram about her road trip, carefully filtered photos of desert sunsets and meaningful quotes about letting go of negativity. Eleanor was probably planning her next charity auction, practicing the humble smile she'd wear while people praised her generosity. Richard was probably recording his podcast about financial success and leadership, dispensing wisdom to his thousands of followers about making tough decisions. The rage that ignited in my chest at that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It burned away the tears, evaporated the self-pity. It wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, focused, surgical. They'd tried to destroy me in front of my daughter. They'd tried to teach Chloe that she was worthless, that we were both disposable. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The beginning of the longest, most carefully executed lesson I would ever teach. I would show them exactly what it cost to throw people away. Not with screaming or violence or dramatic confrontations. I would do it their way, cold, calculated, precise. I would let them destroy themselves. The next morning, Chloe and I were still in the diner booth. The cook, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, brought us breakfast without us ordering. Eggs, toast, bacon, orange juice for Chloe. When I tried to pay, she waved me off. "On the house. You look like you need it more than I need the money." She introduced herself as Lena Petrova, the owner of the diner. Her accent was thick, Russian or Eastern European, softened by years in America but still present. She didn't ask why we were there or where we'd come from. She just watched us eat with quiet, assessing eyes. After the breakfast rush died down, Lena slid into the booth across from me. Chloe was coloring on the paper placemat with crayons Lena had found somewhere in the back, content for the moment. "You're not running from something," Lena said. "It wasn't a question. You're recovering. There's a difference." The words hit me harder than any accusation could have. I looked up at her, and she met my gaze with the kind of understanding that only comes from experience. She'd been here too, maybe not in this exact situation, but somewhere similar. Somewhere that taught her to recognize that particular kind of exhaustion, that specific quality of determination that comes after you've hit bottom and decided to start digging up instead of down. "I have a room upstairs," Lena continued. "It's small, storage, mostly, but there's space for a mattress, and it's warm and dry. You can stay there if you want. In exchange, you wash dishes, help with cleanup, nothing you can't handle." I should have been suspicious. I should have questioned why a stranger would offer help without wanting something in return. But I was too tired to question kindness, and honestly, what choice did I have? We had nowhere to go, almost no money, and winter was coming. "Thank you," I whispered. Lena nodded once and stood up. "Come on. I'll show you where you'll be staying." The room was exactly as she'd described, small, cramped, filled with boxes of supplies and old furniture. But Lena and I spent the afternoon clearing it out, making space for a mattress she pulled from somewhere. She found blankets, pillows, some clothes that might fit Chloe. She did all of this without commentary, without making me feel like a charity case. She just helped, in the same matter-of-fact way she fried eggs and poured coffee. That night, Chloe and I slept in a real bed for the first time since the highway. It wasn't much. The mattress sagged in the middle, and I could hear the diner's refrigerator humming through the thin floor, but it was ours. It was safe. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something instead of waiting for someone else to give me permission to exist. The work at Lena's diner was hard but honest. I washed dishes until my hands were raw and pruned. I mopped floors, cleaned bathrooms, took out trash, learned to work the grill during rush hours. Lena paid me under the table, small amounts that I hoarded like a dragon with treasure. Every dollar went into an old coffee can I kept hidden in our room. I stopped thinking in terms of comfort and started thinking in terms of survival, then strategy. Chloe enrolled in the local elementary school. It was small, underfunded, but the teachers were kind. She made friends quickly, the way children do when they're given half a chance. I watched her start to smile again, start to laugh. She stopped asking when we were going back to Grandma and Grandpa's house. She stopped flinching when someone raised their voice. And every night, after she fell asleep, I planned. I thought about the Thorne family constantly, not with the hot, unfocused rage of those first few days, but with cold, analytical precision. I studied them the way a general studies enemy territory. And the more I studied, the more I realized how vulnerable they actually were. Richard Thorne was a financial advisor with a podcast called Wealth Leadership that had nearly 15,000 regular listeners. He positioned himself as a self-made success story, a man who'd built an empire through hard work and smart decisions. His whole brand was about integrity, about making tough choices, about being a leader. His followers sent him questions about investments, about retirement planning, about how to talk to their kids about money. He answered them with the confident authority of someone who'd figured it all out. Eleanor Thorne was the president of the local school board and chair of at least 3 different charity organizations. She was beloved. People saw her as the kind of woman who gave selflessly, who cared deeply about education and community. She organized fundraisers, gave speeches about supporting underprivileged children, smiled for photos while handing over oversized checks. And Vivian, sweet, beautiful Vivian, with her 75,000 Instagram followers and her lifestyle blog and her sponsorship deals with makeup companies and boutique fitness studios. She posted inspirational quotes about self-love and authenticity. She shared morning routines and smoothie recipes and tips for living your best life. Her followers called her their daily dose of sunshine. They had built their lives on social media, on carefully curated images of perfection. They were public figures, small-scale celebrities in our community and online. They'd turned themselves into brands. And brands can be destroyed. The baby monitor had been an afterthought 3 years ago. I'd bought it cheap at a thrift store when Chloe was still waking up multiple times a night, and I'd installed it in her bedroom at the Thorne house so I could hear her from my own room down the hall. It had a cloud recording feature, something I'd barely paid attention to at the time. The company offered free storage for a year, then a cheap subscription after that. I'd kept paying the subscription even after Chloe started sleeping through the night because I'd forgotten to cancel it, and it was only $5 a month. That baby monitor had been sitting on a shelf in Chloe's old room for 3 years, occasionally picking up audio from the hallway outside. I'd never thought about it after we left. But late one night, about a week after we arrived at Lena's, I logged into the account on one of the diner's old computers. just to see if it was still active. It was. And the recordings were still there. Years of them. Hundreds of hours of audio files, automatically saved to the cloud. I started listening, not sure what I was hoping to find. What I found was everything. Richard and Eleanor arguing about money, about me, laughing about how they'd cut off my access to the family account to watch me crawl. Eleanor on the phone with a friend, mocking a student with autism, making fun of his speech patterns, calling him a lost cause who was bringing down test scores. Vivian drunk one evening, bragging to a boyfriend about how she'd funneled charity auction money into her personal account to buy designer handbags, how easy it was to fake invoices and pocket the difference. Years of ammunition, years of them being exactly who they were when they thought no one was listening, and I had all of it, time-stamped and archived. I taught myself video editing using free software and YouTube tutorials. I spent every free moment I had learning how to cut audio, how to blur identifying details, how to add subtitles and context. I studied other viral exposé videos, learned what made them spread, what made people care. I created accounts on TikTok and YouTube under the name Truth Behind the Filters. No profile picture, no personal information, just a simple bio. What happens behind the perfect life? I didn't tell my story. I didn't need to. I let them tell theirs. The first video was simple. Just audio of Eleanor at a school board meeting after hours, talking to another board member about a student. Honestly, if these special needs kids can't keep up, why are we bending over backwards to accommodate them? It's not fair to the normal children. The audio was slightly muffled but clear enough. I added subtitles. A simple title card explaining this was the president of a school board that claimed to value inclusion. I posted it late at night and went to bed without expectations. 2 days later, it had 300 views, then 1,000, then 50,000. Someone had shared it to a parents' group on Facebook, then another, then it jumped to Twitter. Local news sources picked it up. Within a week, there was a petition calling for Eleanor's resignation with over 5,000 signatures. I waited 2 weeks before posting the next video. Vivian this time, drunk and laughing about buying fake followers and stealing content. It's so easy, her voice slurred from my laptop speakers. No one actually checks. You just repost someone else's caption, change a few words, and boom, you're an inspiration. And the charity shit? That's just free PR. Write it off on taxes, take photos for Instagram, keep the leftover cash. It's genius. This one exploded faster. Influencer drama always did. Her sponsors started dropping her within 48 hours. First the small ones, then the bigger names. Her follower count started bleeding. The comments on her Instagram turned from supportive to vicious. She tried to make an apology video, but her comments section was disabled within hours. I felt nothing watching it happen. I'd expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even joy. But all I felt was that same cold focus. This wasn't about entertainment. This wasn't revenge in the emotional sense. This was about consequences. This was about making sure they couldn't do this to anyone else. Richard was next, and his fall was the most surgical. I waited until he scheduled a live podcast recording, promoting it for weeks in advance, building hype. I sent anonymous tips to a few tech-savvy listeners I'd found in online forums, people who knew how to access streaming software. When Richard went live, ready to dispense wisdom about financial integrity to his 1,000 viewers, someone hijacked the audio feed. Instead of his intro music, his listeners heard Richard's voice from 2 years ago, caught on that baby monitor. I don't sponsor losers, even if they're my wife's kid. Liz is a drain on resources, always has been. If she can't figure out how to make herself useful, she doesn't deserve support. The silence after that audio clip ended was deafening. I watched the live stream count drop from 1,000 viewers to 700 to 300. The chat exploded. Richard tried to explain, tried to claim it was taken out of context, but his voice was shaking. He ended the stream after 10 minutes. His podcast never recovered. I watched all of this happen from the small room above Lena's diner. I watched their social media empires crumble. I watched their reputations disintegrate. I watched them scramble to control the narrative, to explain, to apologize, to deflect. Nothing worked. Once the internet decided you were guilty, there was no coming back. Lena found me one evening sitting at the old computer, watching a news segment about the shocking revelations surrounding the Thorne family. She stood in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. That's your family, isn't it? The ones they're talking about. I didn't see the point in lying. Yes. And you're the one who posted those videos. Yes. Lena nodded slowly. She walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Good. Some people need to be shown who they really are. The world should know. She never mentioned it again, but I knew she understood. Lena had her own ghosts, her own reasons for recognizing when justice was being served. 6 months passed. Chloe thrived. She was doing well in school, making friends, laughing more than I'd ever seen her laugh. We moved from the storage room to a small apartment above the diner that Lena helped us afford. I'd started doing freelance video editing work, surprisingly lucrative once I built a small portfolio. We weren't rich, but we weren't desperate. For the first time in my life, I was building something that belonged to me. Then the letter came. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a brief, professional letter explaining that a class action lawsuit was being formed against the school board, specifically targeting Eleanor Thorne and several other board members. Multiple families were suing for discrimination and misuse of funds. The lawyer had seen the videos I'd posted, tracked them back to the original account, and wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide testimony or additional evidence. They offered witness protection, anonymity, legal support. They weren't asking me to be the face of anything. They just wanted my help to make sure justice was actually served. I said yes. But I also knew there was one more thing I needed to do. Something personal. Something that couldn't be delivered through screens and social media. I needed to see them face to face. Not to scream or cry or demand apologies. I needed them to see what they'd failed to destroy. I needed them to see Chloe and me, alive and whole and stronger than they'd ever wanted us to be. I created a fake charity organization, Hope for Daughters Supporting Mothers and Children. I designed a professional website in an afternoon, created a fake board of directors, wrote a mission statement about empowerment and resilience. Then I sent out invitations to an exclusive launch event at a local community center. Press opportunity? The invitation promised. Rehabilitate your image, show your commitment to the community. I knew they couldn't resist. They were desperate by then, their reputations in tatters, looking for any chance to prove they were still good people, still worthy of respect. They all RSVP'd within a day. The night of the event, I arrived early. The community center was small, just one main room with a small stage and some folding chairs. I decorated it minimally, a few banners with the fake organization's logo, a table with refreshments, a large screen set up at the front. I'd hired a local college student to work the door, checking names against the guest list, all very official. Richard arrived first, alone, wearing a suit that looked slightly too tight, like he'd gained weight from stress. Eleanor came 10 minutes later, dressed like she was going to a gala, pearls in a formal dress, armor against judgment. Vivian was last, in an all-white outfit, her attempt at looking angelic and redeemed. She'd cut her hair short, a visible change to signal transformation. They didn't sit together. They spread out across the room, trying to look casual, checking their phones. A few other people were there, strangers I'd hired to fill seats and make the event look legitimate. A local newspaper reporter I'd contacted, telling him there might be an interesting story here. When everyone was seated, I dimmed the lights from the small control room at the back. The screen at the front flickered to life, but not with the charity presentation they were expecting. Instead, a home video began to play. The footage was grainy, shot on my old phone 3 years ago. Chloe, just 5 years old, sitting at our small plastic table in her room at the Thorne house, coloring with crayons. The timestamp in the corner showed it was from the week before we were abandoned. Chloe looked up at the camera, at me holding the phone, and asked in that innocent voice children have, "Mommy, do Grandma and Grandpa love me, or only when I'm better than Sarah?" My voice on the recording, tired and sad. "They don't know how to love, baby, but I do, and I always will." The video ended. The lights stayed dim. I walked out from the control room, Chloe beside me. She was 10 now, taller, stronger, more confident. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, and she held my hand tightly but not fearfully. We walked to the front of the room and stopped in front of the screen. The silence was absolute. Richard stared at the floor. Eleanor's hand had gone to her pearl necklace, clutching it like a lifeline. Vivian's perfect makeup couldn't hide how pale she'd gone. Chloe spoke first. Her voice was clear, steady, nothing like the frightened child who'd been dumped on the highway. "You left me on the road, but I never needed you to find my way home." That was all she said, all she needed to say. We'd practiced it together, this moment, this confrontation. I'd asked her if she wanted to do this, if she was ready. She'd nodded immediately. "They should know they failed, Mommy. They tried to make us disappear, but we're still here." I looked at my mother, at Richard, at Vivian. I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to list every moment of cruelty, every casual dismissal, every time they'd made me feel worthless. I wanted to ask how they could abandon a child, how they could sleep at night knowing what they'd done. But I didn't. Because the truth was, they already knew. They knew exactly what they'd done. They knew exactly who they were. And now everyone else knew too. "You taught me what not to become," I said quietly. "That's all." Chloe and I walked toward the door. Behind us, I heard Eleanor try to speak, her voice high and desperate. "Lissa, please, just let us explain." I didn't stop, didn't turn around. We walked out into the evening air, and I took the first deep breath I'd taken in years. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. The reporter had done his job, putting out a call about a developing story. Some of Vivian's former followers were there, people who'd been taken in by her scam. Parents from Eleanor's school district, a few of Richard's former podcast listeners. They weren't an angry mob. They were just people who wanted answers. who wanted to see if the Thorns would finally take accountability. The reporter approached me with a microphone. "Miss Thorne? Do you have anything you want to say to the people who did this to you?" I thought about it for a moment. Chloe squeezed my hand, and I looked down at her. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that showed she understood exactly what this moment meant. She was free. We both were. I looked back at the reporter. They taught me what not to become. That's all I need to say. We walked away from the community center, from the crowd, from the people who'd tried to erase us. We walked back toward Lena's diner, where a small apartment waited for us, where we'd built a life out of nothing but determination and the kindness of strangers. Chloe skipped beside me, talking about a science project she was working on at school, and I listened, really listened, because I had the luxury now of being present, of being safe, of knowing that the worst was behind us. The lawsuit took 8 months to settle. Eleanor and 2 other board members were removed from their positions and faced financial penalties. Richard's financial advisor license was suspended pending investigation. Vivian's online presence never recovered. She deleted all her social media accounts eventually, disappeared from public view. I never spoke to any of them again, not because I was cruel or vindictive, but because I simply didn't need to. They weren't part of my story anymore. They were just a lesson I'd learned and moved past. Lena eventually offered to sell me a partnership in the diner. I accepted. We renamed it Lena and Lissa's, and I painted a new sign myself, my hands steady as I worked. Chloe helped, getting more paint on herself than the wood, laughing the whole time. Sometimes people recognize me from the videos. The internet never really forgets. They ask if I'm the woman who exposed the Thorns, if the videos were real, how I'm doing now. I usually deflect, keep things brief. This isn't a story I need to tell over and over. It's not entertainment. It was survival, and then it was justice, and now it's just the past. Chloe is thriving. She's in middle school now, part of the debate team, talking about wanting to be a lawyer someday. She says she wants to help people who can't help themselves, wants to make sure people are held accountable when they hurt others. I couldn't be prouder. I've learned things I never expected to learn. I learned that family isn't about blood. Lena showed me more love in a few months than my mother did in my entire life. The stranger in the pickup truck who gave us a ride showed me more compassion than my stepfather ever did. The online strangers who sent small donations and supportive messages showed me more community than my sister ever did. I learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud or violent or destructive. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to disappear. Sometimes it's letting people face the consequences of their own actions. Sometimes it's building a better life and letting them watch from whatever hole they've dug for themselves. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. That Chloe is stronger than I ever had to be at her age. That we can survive things we never thought possible and come out the other side not just intact, but better. But most importantly, I learned that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And I look at the Thorne family now with complete, peaceful indifference. They don't make me angry anymore. They don't make me sad. They simply don't matter. They tried to teach me I was worthless. Instead, they taught me I was invaluable. They tried to destroy me. Instead, they forged me into someone who couldn't be broken. They tried to write me out of the story. Instead, they gave me the pen. On quiet evenings, after the diner closes and Chloe's asleep in her room, I sometimes sit on our small balcony and look out at the desert. The same desert where they left us. The same endless sky. But it doesn't look hostile anymore. It looks like freedom. It looks like possibility. I never went back to Interstate 40. I never drove past that spot where they threw us out like garbage. I don't need to. That place doesn't define me anymore. It's just asphalt and sand and a memory that's losing its power with every day that passes. Sometimes Chloe asks me if I'm happy. It's a complicated question. Happy isn't quite the right word. I'm at peace. I'm secure. I'm building something real. And yes, there are moments of pure, uncomplicated joy that I never experienced in all those years of trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. The truth is, being abandoned on that highway was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the moment everything broke, but it was also the moment I finally broke free. I look at my daughter now, confident and kind and unafraid, and I know we made it. Not despite what happened to us, but because of what we chose to do after it happened. We chose to survive. We chose to rebuild. We chose to let the people who hurt us face their own reflections, instead of letting them define ours. There's a photograph on the wall of our apartment that Lena took without us knowing. It's from about a year after we arrived at the diner. Chloe and I are in the kitchen, both of us covered in flour, laughing at something. Probably one of Chloe's jokes that weren't actually funny but made us laugh anyway. The light coming through the window catches us just right, and we look incandescent with joy. That's who we are now. Not the broken people left on the side of the road. Not victims of someone else's cruelty. Just 2 people who learn that family is what you build, not what you're born into. Just 2 people who learned that the best revenge is living well and letting karma handle the rest. The Thorne family faded into obscurity. Last I heard, they'd moved to a different state, trying to start over where no one knew their names. I hope they found peace eventually. I genuinely do. Not because I forgive them, but because my peace doesn't depend on their suffering. It depends on me, on Chloe, on the life we're creating one day at a time. And that life is good. Really, genuinely good. Better than anything I ever had when I was begging for scraps of affection from people who saw me as disposable. Better than I ever imagined possible during those dark hours on the highway, carrying my daughter through the desert with no idea how we'd survive the night. We survived. We thrived. We won. Not because we destroyed them, though we did. Not because we got revenge, though we did. We won because we refused to let them define our worth. We won because we built something beautiful out of the ashes they left us in. We won because we're still here, still standing, still moving forward, and they have to live with what they did, every day. Every time they look in the mirror. Every time they remember that they threw away two people who could have loved them, if only they'd been capable of loving back. That's punishment enough. That's justice enough. As for me and Chloe, we're just getting started. The world is wider than a highway in the desert. The possibilities are endless. And we're free to chase every single one of them, unburdened by people who never deserved us in the first place. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what you never really had. And sometimes you have to be thrown away to discover you were never trash to begin with. You were treasure, just surrounded by people too blind to see it. Now I see it. Chloe sees it. And that's all that matters. The highway is behind us. The horizon is ahead. And we're walking toward it together, mother and daughter, survivor and survivor, holding hands and refusing to look back at the people who tried to make us disappear. They failed. We made sure of that. And we'll keep making sure of it every single day by living lives they could never touch, never diminish, never destroy. That's the real ending. Not confrontation. Not tears. Not apologies that will never come. Just the simple, powerful act of surviving, thriving, and moving forward without them. That's how the story ends. With us, free.